You're listening to the 49 Carats Podcast, a 49ers Goldmine production with Stephanie Sanchez.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another edition of the 49 Carats Podcast. I am your host, Steph, and today I'm going to be previewing the 49ers defense and how they match up against the Cardinals offense in their final regular season game of the season. It's the finale. This is what we've all been waiting for before the playoffs. So let's just get right into it. And as always, we start with the injury news. So we have injury reports from both teams. For the 49ers, Aaron Banks is out with his ankle injury this week. Dre Greenlaw is going to be out this week, but Kyle Shanahan did say that if it was a playoff game, he would have been able to go. So that's a good sign for Dre Greenlaw and his availability for next week. Ambry Thomas remains out with his ankle injury. Kevin Givens also out with his knee injury, but it sounds like he'll be back for the playoffs as well. And Jimmy Garoppolo remains out with his foot injury, although we did hear that Jimmy Garoppolo is progressing well in his surgery and coming back from his injury. And it's still possible that he comes back late in the playoffs if the 49ers made it there, either the championship round or the Super Bowl. And I also just want to say, at this point, I can only assume that Jimmy Garoppolo, if he were to return at any point in the playoffs, it would be as a backup. There's no reason to bench Brock Purdy right now. So when you see these reports that Jimmy Garoppolo is going to be back, don't assume that he would be back as a starter. I would assume he would just simply be there as depth, and you can never have too much of that at any position. So I am all for it. All right, the other two players who are questionable for the 49ers, Eric Armstead and Javon Kinlaw. Kinlaw was dealing with an illness this week. It seems like the illnesses were just going around in the 49ers building this week. So Javon Kinlaw came down with the bug, but he's questionable, so I would imagine that he plays. Now, for the Cardinals, they're just going full tank at this point in the season. They named David Blough their starter, so no Colt McCoy, no Kyler Murray, obviously, and no DeAndre Hopkins. He's going to be out with a knee injury. And then today we heard James Conner is going to be out with a knee injury of his own. Their linebacker, Zaven Collins, is going to be out, as well as Robbie Anderson dealing with a back injury. So a lot of people are going to be out in this game, and so it's going to be interesting. It'll be like a preseason game for the Cardinals, and on the 49ers side, they just have to make sure they play their ball, because last week it seemed like they were getting a little too comfortable with themselves, especially on the defensive side of the ball, and they got to refocus in this game. So that's why I named this episode Time to Refocus, all right? So let's talk about the Cardinals offense. And this one was weird, okay? This is weird to even write down and rank out, because the Cardinals have changed their quarterback this season, obviously, with Kyler Murray tearing his ACL. A lot of their season-long rankings don't apply in this case. It wouldn't be very helpful. So I'm only looking at the last 3 games. The last 3 games, they have not had Kyler Murray. And I believe it was Colt McCoy for 2 of them, David Blough last week. So last 3 games, Cardinals offense, they ranked 12th in average time of possession, 12th in red zone scoring percentage, 12th in quarterback sacked percentage. So not that high, pretty surprising. 15th in giveaways per game, also not that high. So, not terrible at taking care of the football right now. 17th in completion percentage, 18th in average yards per rushing attempt. They average 4.4 yards per rushing attempt. But of course, you got to remember that James Conner has been playing these last few games. He got hurt in last week's game. So, that could possibly change with him being out in this game. They're 19th in touchdowns per game, 20th in average rushing yards per game, 21st in yards per game, 21st in points per game, 21st in first downs per game, 27th in third down conversion percentage, 29th in average scoring margin. So that tells you right there that they are still, losing as a team, an average of 5 points in most of these games, these last 3 games that they've played. And yeah, the third down conversion percentage, not very good. That's something the 49ers can absolutely capitalize on. What's going on, Melissa? Thank you so much for joining. Melissa says, Steph, defense needs a bounce back game. Do you see more David Blow sacks or interceptions? Well, he was sacked twice last week, and that was his first game as the starter for the Cardinals, and that was against the Atlanta Falcons, who also not much to play for, so their defense is probably not as good as the 49ers. So I would say sacks, because in that game, I don't think he threw any interceptions. So I think there are more sacks against David Blow than interceptions for him. But in any case, I think it's going to be an opportunity for the 49ers to capitalize on them facing lesser talent, right? And at this point, they have to capitalize it because they have to prove it to themselves. They got to get the monkey off the back. After the game last week, there's some frustration with that. There's some, disappointment in that. Came away with the win, but you still have to prove it to yourself that, hey, this isn't us, all right? 500 yards given up to the Raiders, that's not us at all. We don't want to do that again. So it's time for the 49ers to kind of prove themselves right before the playoffs, no less. So let's look at the battle of the trenches. I won't spend too much time on this screen because I'll actually show you guys the offensive line of the Arizona Cardinals is actually not that bad. So I'll just say that. So if you guys were hoping for Nick Bosa to potentially pass the franchise record for sacks, he needs 3 to pass it. He would need 2 to tie it. It might not be as easy. All right. So it's kind of same thing against the Raiders last week. I kind of warned of the same thing. So the Cardinals offensive line also, pretty good, not bad. Their left tackle, Josh Jones, he's averaging 2 to 3 pressures per game allowed, and he's allowed just 2 sacks this season. So Nick Bosa will see a lot of him. Then their left guard, Max Garcia, only 1 sack allowed this season. Their center, Billy Price, is really good. 5 sacks allowed this season, but none since week 11. No quarterback hits allowed at all this season. And their right guard, Will Hernandez, 3 sacks allowed this season, but hasn't allowed a sack since week 7. And he's allowed just 1 quarterback hit this season. And their right tackle, who I would assume Nick Bosa will go up against quite a lot. He, I would say, is the biggest liability on this Cardinals offensive line. He's given up 5 sacks and 46 pressures this season. That's the most from the Cardinals offensive lineman. He's given up the most. So I would imagine, because Nick Bosa switches sides, he likes having a favorable matchup and he'll move wherever he thinks is best. I would imagine he's rushing from the opposite end where he's lining up against the Cardinals' right tackle, Calvin Beachum. So, yeah, I think there's a chance. There's a chance there. But look, the last time that these 2 teams played was in week 11. Okay, so not that long ago. And their left tackle, Josh Jones, as I mentioned, he allowed 2 pressures, a hurry, and a quarterback hit back in week 11. Max Garcia, their left guard, he didn't play in week 11. Their center, Billy Price, he allowed just 1 pressure and 1 hurry. Their right guard, Will Hernandez, didn't play in week 11. Their right tackle, Calvin Beachum, like I said, the liability, he allowed 5 pressures, 4 hurries, and a quarterback hit. But still, they didn't give it. Oh my God, what am I saying? They didn't give up any sacks in that week 11 game. So something to consider. But like I said, if there's any liability on this Cardinals offensive line, it's their right tackle, Calvin Beachum. So keep an eye on that in this game. Let's talk about the Cardinals tight end. What's going on, Josh? Glad you can join the live. Let's talk about Trey McBride. Okay, he's a rookie, really, really good player. I liked him coming out of the draft. So he got his first touchdown last week against the Falcons back in week 11. He was making his first, or I guess his second start. He had 4 targets, 4 catches, 14 yards. So not much going for him in that game. But like I said, you know, there aren't a lot of weapons out there at this point. DeAndre Hopkins isn't going to play. James Conner isn't going to play. So Rondell Moore hasn't played for the last few weeks. So Trey McBride, maybe someone that David Blow leans on. And I would also mention that last week when he had 10 targets and 7 catches and a touchdown and 78 yards, David Blow was the quarterback. So maybe Blow likes to throw to his tight end, in this case, Trey McBride. This season, the 49ers have been pretty good overall against tight ends. They're on average, they're giving up 41.38 yards a game to tight ends. And that went up kind of drastically since last week, because last week the 49ers defense gave up 127 yards and a touchdown to the Raiders tight ends last week. So it wasn't a great showing from them. They usually defend against tight ends a lot better than that. But of course, they usually do a lot of things better than how they did it against the Raiders last week. So, yeah, I would expect a better game from the 49ers defense in this one because, again, they got to get the monkey off the back. They got to, get the scent off of them. Like, it doesn't feel good, all right, for that to be the last memory in their brains, what they gave up against the Raiders. So they're going to try to undo that as much as they can in this game. So Trey McBride might be someone who they target a lot in this game. Like I said, David Blow seemed to like McBride and throwing to him. But, all things considered, I think the 49ers take care of business in this game. We also have to consider the fact that Dre Greenlaw isn't active for this game. So it's going to be Aziz, Fred Warner, and could be George Odom, or it could be Flanagan Fowles, filling in as well. Josh says our back end just gives up too many explosives. Yeah, and that's something they have to fix. It's definitely an issue, and going into the playoffs and showing that as a flaw, other teams are going to see that, and they're going to try to attack you the same way. So, yeah, definitely something they got to clean up. I'll talk more about that in a bit. But let's talk about the Cardinals wide receivers now. They got Hollywood Brown, Marquise Brown. His first year with the Cardinals, he didn't play in week 11 against the Niners. So, not much to compare for, how he did then because he didn't play. But I could say that he does have some involvement in this offense. Obviously, DeAndre Hopkins isn't playing, so you can imagine that Hollywood Brown is going to have a lot of involvement. In fact, if you look at some of his numbers the first few weeks of the game, keep in mind DeAndre Hopkins didn't play, I believe, the first 4 weeks of the season due to his suspension. Hollywood Brown was targeted 6 times, 10 times, 17 times. That was against the, I believe, the Rams in week 3. So that's crazy. So that's the potential that he has when he's the, one of the main targets out there. So we can assume that Hollywood Brown is going to see a lot of targets in this game, just given the fact that DeAndre Hopkins is going to be out. Last week against the Falcons, he had 9 targets, 6 catches, 61 yards. Again, that was with David Blow as the quarterback. So Blow not adverse to throwing to Hollywood Brown, and that is as expected. Now, I was going to talk about Robbie Anderson, but Robbie Anderson is out, and he's been as useless to a team as any midseason trade could be. So I wasn't even going to talk much about him anyway. So he's not going to play in this game. That's okay. All right, the one guy I wanted to talk about from the 49ers side, Dalmador Lenore. I mean, I praise this kid when I feel like he deserves it, okay? But I think he needs some tough love right now. He had a very, very forgettable week, maybe his worst game, one of his worst games of the season last week against the Raiders. But, it came at a time when the entire defense had one of his worst games of the season. So I don't know, maybe it was just a whole team thing. But last week he allowed 5 catches, 108 yards. That's the second most yardage that he's allowed this season. And he allowed a passer rating of 113.7 in his coverage. That's the sixth time this season that he's allowed a passer rating over 100 in his coverage. So Lenore continues to be a liability in the secondary. The secondary is good. It's been good for the most part. If you look at every individual player, they're all good. You think Charvarius Ward, you think of Deshaun Gibson, really good players. And then Diamador Lenore is one of those guys who you're kind of like, could we get by with Lenore as a CB2? And we've got him by, but will it be enough in the playoffs, or is he going to get burned at some point? Well, I think in that game against the Raiders, we've seen that, yes, he could certainly get burned, but it's all about how he responds. So, yes, this game against the Cardinals isn't going to be a huge test. The Cardinals aren't playing for anything. They aren't going to have DeAndre Hopkins out there. I mentioned Hollywood Brown. He is going to play. And I'll mention one of the other receivers here in a bit. But still, Lenore has to show us something in this game, like make us feel good about you, So I hope he has a better game. Definitely, I imagine that he will, I'm really pulling for him. I want him to do well. So let's just see how he does. Joey in the comments says this needs to be a blowout or at least a 10-point win with all these big name Cardinals out. Absolutely. I agree. And, I think they do it because one, I think the defense is a little pissed off for how they performed last week. So in a way, I think they might overcompensate in this game just from that alone. I think they're going to come out with a lot of energy, and they have to because of how last week transpired. So, yeah, I think they play better on defense. And again, yes, they're going up against David Blow. They're going up against a backup running back, backup wide receivers, like a backup tight end. The Cardinals are putting out a not practice squad, a preseason team out there. So, yes, you pretty much have to punch them in the mouth. And anything other than a blowout would be a disappointment. So, yeah, I'm totally with you there. Josh in the comments says, as long as a pass rush brings heat, our DBs will be okay. When we don't have a consistent rush, there are bound to be breakdowns. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because, yeah, the defensive line against the Raiders, I don't want to say they struggled because, I would say Nick Bosa was, getting in Stidham's face quite often, but the fact that Stidham was just getting rid of the ball so quickly, made things difficult for, the back end. So, yeah, I mean, yes, if the pass rush is there, they'll be fine. But as I mentioned a few slides ago, the Cardinals' offensive line is not that bad. So we'll see how this turns out, but hopefully we see a better game from the pass rush as well, because that's another thing that kind of fell a little short in that Raiders game. So definitely got to get the bad taste out of their mouth. The other guy I wanted to talk about is Greg Dortch from the Cardinals because, he hasn't been a starter all season, but when he's gotten the opportunity, he's proven he can be pretty solid. Like he has a 80% catch percentage this season, which is second highest in the NFL per Next Gen Stats. He averages 4.2 yards of separation, which ranks fourth in the NFL. So he's really good. He's solid. The Cardinals just haven't had a big need for him because they have so many receivers ahead of him on the depth chart. But again, because they've dealt with a lot of injuries this season, when Dortch has gotten the opportunity, he's had some good games. I mean, back in week 3 against the Rams, he was targeted 10 times, 9 catches, 80 yards. Against the Niners in week 11, 10 targets, 9 catches, 103 yards. So again, he could be a guy for this Cardinals offense. Last week against the Falcons, he had 10 targets, but just 4 catches. So is that a chemistry issue with David Blow? I don't know. Maybe they aren't exactly in sync, but that's something to keep in mind as well. So he's seeing the targets. 10 targets is quite a lot, but maybe the connection is just not clicking as good as it could be. So that could be a plus for the 49ers. Let me see some comments here. Nathan says Drake Jackson needs to rush if Murray runs or if Murray is out. Which Murray? Murray's out. Murray has an ACL. He's not playing. Yeah, Josh said David Blow is starting. Yeah, so yeah, they're down to their third string quarterback, kind of like the 49ers, but Brock Purdy ain't walking through that door. So, hey, tough luck for the Cardinals. All right, moving on. Let's talk about Jimmy Ward, okay? Because he was actually one of the few bright spots in that game against the Cardinals. And I'll tell you why. Look, since week 12, he has 2 interceptions, a forced fumble. Since week 14, he's allowed just 6.2 yards per reception. He has 12 stops, so he's contributing in the run game as well. And he hasn't allowed more than 30 yards in his coverage since week 12. So I'm happy with how he's playing these last few weeks. Last week he was targeted 6 times, gave up 4 catches, but just 27 yards. So he's been on lockdown mode, lately, and I hope he keeps it up because, like I said, Greg Dortch, he's gonna be seeing a lot of him lining up, I would assume, primarily out of the slot. So Greg Dortch, like I said, going back to Dortch, averages 4.2 yards of separation. He's fast. He knows how to get open. So will be a test for Jimmy Ward. But I like what I've been seeing so far out of him. So I'm not too worried about him. Melissa says, cheers to JJ Watt retirement. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's actually a bit of an honor, right? For anyone who's going to go to the game to know that it's JJ Watt's final game at Levi Stadium. Like, that's pretty cool. First ballot Hall of Famer, no doubt. So yeah, credit to JJ Watt. I'm sure he's going to try to have a good game out there. So we'll see how that goes. Josh says, unfortunately, I don't think we'll re-sign Jimmy, but he played himself into a new contract this offseason. Well, I don't know if you saw, Josh, but I saw reports that the Raiders are going to try to sign Jimmy, or at least look into it this offseason. Are you talking about Jimmy or I'm so thrown off because you said Jimmy, and I know we're talking about Jimmy Ward, but you spelled it with a Y. So I thought you were talking about Jimmy Garoppolo. But yes, that did happen about Jimmy Garoppolo, that the Raiders are going to look to sign him or consider signing him this offseason. But yes, Jimmy Ward also played himself into a new contract, I think, this offseason. Whether that is with the 49ers or not, I don't know. I hope so. And he's one of those players I hope retires as a Niner because he's done so much for this team. He's really been with this team since the bottom, those really bad days. And so, yeah, I would love Jimmy Ward to stay on this team, but I don't know what happens. Don't know what happens this offseason. All right, moving on. Now, the one guy I got to talk about right now. All right, we got to talk about him. Talanoa Hufanga, okay? It's time. It's time we have a talk. And DeMeco Ryans, I've been talking about him in my last few episodes, okay? And I said, if you're the first one in the wrong place, that's no bueno, okay? And that's just what he's been doing this entire time. DeMeco Ryans was pretty candid talking about Hufanga in his press conference earlier this week. He said, we have to play better on the back end with eye discipline. It costs us some really big plays. he has to clean up his eyes. Talking about Hufanga, too many big plays giving up, and Huff knows that. Protecting us in the back end as a racer, he can't be dirty. So, yeah, I mean, it's what I've been saying. It's what everyone's been saying. And D'Amico Ryans also mentioned the fact that Hufanga doesn't have to play hero ball. Not every play is his to make. So not every tackle is his to make. There are so many good guys on this defense, so many good tacklers. You don't have to be the first one to the ball. And half the time, you're not even making the right decision and you're not even going to the ball to begin with. So, yeah, he needs to clean this up. All right. And I hope he does. The fact that he at this point he's been put on blast by his boss publicly, I would imagine that he looks to clean that up. But this has been a reoccurring thing with Hufanga. It feels like it was better in the first half of the season, and I'll show you what I mean because there was another tweet. Yeah, this one right here by Akash, who posted this the other day. Talanoa Hufanga. This is per PFF. First 10 games of the season, 4 interceptions, 1 touchdown allowed in his coverage. Last 6 games, 0 interceptions, 5 touchdowns allowed in his coverage. So this right here, I think, speaks to him being he's regressed, okay? And in the second half of the season, these last 6 games, he's regressed. And, I'm really hoping for him to turn it around because there's no better time to turn it around than right before the playoffs. Otherwise, teams are going to be attacking him. They're going to try to bait him. So he needs to clean this up. I hope we see a clean game from him against the Cardinals. Okay. He needs to play something to just get this monkey off his back as well, to prove that he could play a clean game and he's not going to get put himself in the wrong situation. And this is crazy. I want to talk about Deshaun Gibson because Deshaun Gibson, who we thought maybe, going into the season, safety was a big question mark. And we were like, who's going to play opposite Hufanga, because Jimmy Ward was going to be out. Deshaun Gibson came in and has absolutely flourished, man. He has allowed 1 touchdown, 371 yards, 69.6. I don't know what that means, right? What's the RAT mean? I don't know. When targeted and has, passer rating, I think, 69.6 passer rating when targeted and has 3 interceptions. Missed tackle rate of 1.7%. Sean Gibson. Talanoa Hufanga, on the other hand, has allowed 6 touchdowns, 379 yards, 91.7 passer rating, and has 4 interceptions. Missed tackle rate of 7.9. And this is according to Pro Football Reference. So that kind of paints a picture right there of the differences between these two guys. Gibson has only allowed 1 touchdown. Hufanga has allowed 6 touchdowns, and then the missed tackle rate is pretty large for Hufanga as well. So he just needs to clean it up across the board. The 49ers need that from him. When the 49ers, the first few weeks of the season, they were playing some lights out defense. It was because the back end was playing some good football. And yeah, Emmanuel Mosley was the CB2 at that time. I think that helped. Helped that they had a lot of health at that point in the season across the board. But still, I think we know they can do it. They just gotta do it. Nathan asks, Steph, who do you think we're going to be drafting in 2023? Whew, I don't know, man. It is too early to be having that conversation. First, we have to know who are they going to let walk in free agency, right? Who are they going to want to bring back? There are a lot of free agents going into this offseason. So first, that will give us a good idea of their priorities and who they would potentially want to draft if they don't bring a guy back, for example. So yeah, it's too early. My head's not there yet, but pretty soon, once the season is over, I go right into draft mode, and you guys will get that type of content as well. Nathan says Raiders are looking at Jimmy Ward. Interesting. If they are, that would not surprise me. I mean, yeah, they had offered him a contract this past off season, didn't they? And he decided not to take it. It was actually for more money. Um, and he decided to stay with 49ers. Great move on his part, but yeah, I guess it wouldn't surprise me if the Raiders tried again. I guess their safeties, Raider safeties, aren't very good, so they can use someone like Jimmy Ward. Nathan asks, should the 49ers start Quantrez Knight? I don't think there's any reason to start Quantrez Knight. He is still, in my book, like developing. I think they would probably start other guys before Knight, but I like him long term. I like his potential. So, no, I don't think that's an option right now, but in the future, it could be. I think he's a player with some uh big playability. So I like that about him, and he was a player I liked in training camp. Yeah, Josh says, yeah, I had no clue that Sean Gibson was going to play this well. I don't think anyone did. If anyone predicted this, man, that person is maybe psychic, because I don't think anyone could have predicted that Sean Gibson would have done this well. And crazy. So a bit of an unsung hero in this defense on this team. So credit to Sean Gibson for sure. Joey says, crazy how the Niners staff always finds gems for the depth. This is part of the reason why John Lynch, I think, deserves to be in the conversation for Executive of the Year, because he makes some great choices for this team. Let's just call it what it is. Melissa says 30 plus on 1-year deals right now who expire in March. Yeah, absolutely. So there you go. Like that's all of the 1-year deals that they have. That's all of the free agents that they're going to be having in March. So what they do in free agency, if they bring guys back, that'll help give us an idea of what they might be looking at in the draft. Josh says it's too early for draft talk, but I wouldn't mind getting even more O-line depth. Absolutely. I mean, O-line depth is something you always try to look at in drafts and something you can't have enough of. So, yeah, I think the 49ers are always looking to improve in that area. Melissa asks, in future, TE1, TE2, TE3, Kittle, Croft, and Warner, and Ross Dwelly finally walks. I like Tyler Croft, so I'm glad you mentioned him as a TE2. Charlie Warner, I know they like him. Ross Dwelly, it seems like his time, is just kind of done. He's fizzed out. So yeah, Ross Dwelly probably finally walks after this season. Let's get back to the talk of this game here. Moving on to the Cardinals running back, Corey Clement. Who the hell is Corey Clement? Okay, I know who Corey Clement is, but it's like James Conner's not playing in this game. So who's this Corey Clement guy, Steph? All right, well, he played with the Eagles for 4 years, so you might remember him in his time there, because at the time, the Eagles kind of were just all over the place with their running backs. They kind of played everyone, and so you might have seen him with the Eagles during that time. But ever since then, he's been with a new team ever since, and he's averaging 4.1 yards per carry in his career. Look, there's not much to say about Corey Clement, because he hasn't been a starter at any point in his career. Besides moments like now when there's injuries and he gets thrust into a starting role. Last week against the Falcons, that's when James Conner got hurt. So he came in that game. He had 7 carries, 32 yards. That's in an average of 4.6 yards per carry. So, yeah, I mean, he's not terrible, but he's not James Conner either. Obviously, that's why he's a career backup. And like I said, the Cardinals are putting a preseason team out there, so this shouldn't be any challenge for the 49ers, as long as they got all their ducks in a row, as long as they learned their lesson after last week. This should go better, and that even goes for the quarterback matchup this week. Jarrett Stidham, Nick Bosa even said that they underestimated Stidham. They underestimated the Raiders last week. So I don't think they're going to do that again. Okay. David Blow, another quarterback who they probably don't have a lot of, film on. I will say that back in 2019, he played extended time with the Lions at his team he was drafted by. But that was 2019. So how can we really put too much stock into this? Because I was looking at Jared Stidham's numbers from when he was with the Patriots, and then he looked like the second coming of Jimmy Garoppolo in that game last week. So I don't even know what to think anymore. But David Blow in 2019 with the Lions, passer rating of 64, 54 completion percentage, 984 yards. I don't think he played the full season. And he had 4 touchdowns and 6 interceptions. And I'm looking at the next gen stats passing chart here, his passer rating on different levels of the field. For the audio listeners, a lot of it is red, which is not good. So that's the David Blow experience, at least back in 2019. Last week against the Falcons, he had a pretty good showing. He threw it 40 times, completed 24 of those, 222 yards, a touchdown, no interceptions. I also mentioned he was sacked twice, but he was spreading the ball around. And he seemed pretty comfortable doing it. I mentioned that he's not adverse to throwing to, some of his receivers, Trey McBride, Hollywood Brown. So the fact that teams basically have to throw against 49ers because they have such a good run defense, that's part of the reason why we see so many teams having success through the air, because they just have to. They have no other choice. So I don't know. I think David Blow is going to get some plays here and there, but I don't think it's going to be anything like last week for him, just because I think the 49ers are going to come into this game really focused and, wanting to prove a point. So, yeah, I think David Blow is probably going to have a tougher time in this one, but we'll just have to wait and see how that goes. Keys of the game for the 49ers defense this week: don't play down to the opponents. This was the same key that I had for them last week going up against Jared Stidham. And what did they do? They played down to their opponent. In fact, even lower to their opponent. I would say the Raiders played pretty well. So, yeah, just don't stoop down to their level. You're better than that. I think the 49ers defense turns it around this week. And the second key of the game is the secondary just needs to step up. After that game last week, after Hufanga got called out, they got some things to prove to themselves and everyone else. All right. So they need to step up. Yes, it is easier competition. The Cardinals playing with a preseason team. It should be easier, but that's all the more reason to just look like a legit defense, and get off the field on third downs. There should be plenty of punts for the Cardinals offense in this game, and the 49ers defense should be able to impose their will. I need to see it. All right. So those are my keys of the game. I don't think this is going to be much. I don't think the Cardinals are going to put much of a fight up against this defense, but that also means the 49ers defense needs to make sure that doesn't happen. So let's talk about some playoff scenarios really quick for the 49ers. They can clinch the 2 seed. All they have to do is win. If they don't win, the Vikings have to lose. The Vikings, I believe, play before the 49ers, right? I don't even remember, but the 49ers have to win or the Vikings have to lose, and or either one. And the 49ers can clinch the 1 seed, although it is a bit of a long shot because the Eagles would have to lose to the Giants. The Giants are resting several key players against the Eagles, so it isn't likely that they're going to beat the Eagles, in which case it would be impossible for the 49ers to clinch the 1 seed if the Eagles win. But let's talk about possible wild card round opponents for the 49ers, seeing as how they they're probably not going to have a bye week, okay? So the Packers, Seahawks, and Lions are the three possibilities. The most likely scenario is that the Packers are the 49ers' wild card opponent. The Packers would come to Levi Stadium and play the 49ers in the wild card round. All they have to do is win, and they're the 7th seed in the NFC. The Seahawks could get in, but it would take the Packers losing, and the Seahawks would have to beat the Rams as well. The Lions have to beat the Packers, and the Seahawks would have to lose if the Lions have any chance of making it. By the way, the Lions have had an incredible season by all accounts. Just everything that they've improved, throughout the season. Towards the end, they were one of those teams I don't think anyone really wanted to play, Packers included. But I really just feel like the NFL. It seems like the NFL wants Packers to make it, so I think they do. I think they beat the Lions. They've been improving in the last month or so as well. So, yeah, the Packers are the most likely scenario, to play in the wild card round against 49ers at Levi Stadium. So, there you have it, people. Josh says the loss to the Bears and Broncos have come back to bite us, as we knew they would, right? I mean, yeah, it really did come down to, the 49ers losing that. But if you think about it, had they won those games, would they really come out with such, I don't know, like, would they have this run? They wouldn't need this run if they beat either of those teams. They wouldn't have started the season, what was it, 3-4? So I think because of that, it lit a fire under them, and they had to turn their season around, and that's why they're on this win streak that they are now. So I don't know. Maybe the outcome would have been a little different either way. We don't know. We don't know these things. That's just what I'm going to tell myself. So, yeah, Melissa says, ill cheeseheads. Packers fans travel well, so I think there's going to be a lot of them in Levi's next weekend if they do make the playoffs. So I think that's going to be a hell of a game and a nerve-wracking one for me. So, okay, Melissa says the pod, Steph, you're a queen. Thank you. I appreciate it. If you guys haven't liked this video yet, make sure you give it some love. Would like some 25 likes on this video. So if you haven't given it a thumbs up yet, let's go. Josh says, I don't want to see the Packers. It feels like a scenario with the Rams where we own them, but it's only a matter of time. Absolutely. I mean, you can't. Yes, the 49ers have owned the Packers. The Packers are not as good as they were before, but it just feels like anything could happen, right? Like anything can really happen. Christian Watson looks like a hell of a player. They don't have Devontae Adams anymore. That's huge for them, right? But they're making it work with who they have, and yeah, I'm a little worried too. I don't think there's anyone. I'd probably play the Seahawks again if it were my choice, but yeah, it seems like it's going to be the Packers. Michelle says, "Yep, those early losses made us stronger." I think so. I think it just lit the fire under them. Melissa says, we won those games, maybe no CMC. That's an excellent point. I didn't even think of that. Yeah, the fact that they needed to turn their season around is kind of what made them trade for Christian McCaffrey in the first place, because they needed that jolt, that point in the season. So, yeah, that's a really good point. And Joe says, let's go Giants. I mean, like I said, it's a long shot, but I believe in miracles. Do you believe in miracles? I think that, I'm still hoping that the Giants can pull something off against the Eagles. And all right, guys, I've been rambling on for 45 minutes here. I'm going to enjoy my Friday night. I hope you guys too. Have a good rest of your Friday evening. Make sure you like this video if you have not yet. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you have not yet. And if you're an audio listener, make sure you leave a rating. Really appreciate it. Have a good rest of your night, guys. Peace.